If Microsoft Copilot can build a Power BI dashboard faster than a trained developer, what does that mean for the future of your job? In this video, we put that exact question to the test with a head-to-head competition between AI and human expertise. One side relies on years of experience, the other on machine automation. The real question, which one delivers value you could actually use in a business setting? The big fear, are developers replaceable? The big question hanging in the air is simple. If Copilot can spin up full dashboards at the press of a button, where does that leave the people who've been trained for years to do the same work by hand? It's not the sort of what if you can wave away casually. For developers who've built careers around mastering Power BI, DAX, and data modeling, the pace at which Microsoft is pushing Copilot isn't just exciting, it's unsettling. And that unease comes from a very real place. Tools inside Microsoft 365 have been quietly adopting AI at breakneck speed, and every new release seems to shift more work away from manual control toward automation. Features that once demanded skill or training now rely on generating suggestions straight from a machine. If your livelihood depends on those skills, of course you're going to ask whether the rug is about to be pulled out from under you. It doesn't help that we've all seen headlines where AI systems outperform people in areas we thought were untouchable for automation. Machines that write code, language models winning at professional exams, AI generating realistic designs in seconds that once took hours of creative labor. Those stories build a powerful narrative. Humans stumble, AI scales. The question that keeps creeping in is whether we're next on the list. With Copilot baked directly into Microsoft's ecosystem, workers don't even choose to compete. It's inserted right into the tools they already use for their jobs. So the tension grows. If the software is already on your dashboard, ready to produce results instantly, how long until that's considered good enough to replace you entirely? But Power BI isn't just a playground of drag-and-drop charts. Beneath the surface, it's about structuring messy business data, resolving conflicts in definitions, and making sure the numbers tie back to real-world processes. Anyone who's had to debug a model with multiple fact tables knows there's a gulf between visual appeal and analytical reliability. That context, that judgment, that's not something an algorithm nails automatically. You can think of it a bit like calculators entering math classrooms decades ago. Did they wipe out the need for mathematicians? No. What they did was shift the ground. Suddenly, fundamental arithmetic held less career weight because machines handled it better, but higher-order reasoning and applied logic only grew in importance. That's the same recalibration developers suspect might happen here. What research often shows is that AI thrives when the rules are explicit and the task is repetitive. Give it a formula to optimize, and it will do so without fatigue. But nuance, the gray area where the right answer depends on business culture or local strategy, isn't where machines shine. Take something as practical as Copilot suggesting a new measure. The model might return a sum or average that looks technically correct, but a seasoned developer knows it needs a filter, context, or adjustment for business meaning. A colleague once shared that exact moment Copilot generated DAX in less than 3 seconds, but they still had to pause, test, and adjust the measure because the machine couldn't understand what valid sales actually meant in the business logic. The AI was efficient, but efficiency needed oversight. So what does this mean in practice? It means we can't take abstract assumptions about AI taking jobs at face value. We need to see how it fares when the task demands both speed and comprehension. We want to know whether Copilot collapses when tables get complicated or if it can hold firm against the chaos of real-world demands. And that's where this experiment matters. Instead of circling around the fear, we're putting it to work directly. AI on one side, human skill on the other, same challenge, same input. Will Copilot prove that manual modeling is outdated, or will the developer show that human interpretation is still indispensable? This video is our way of replacing speculation with evidence. You'll see Copilot tested under the same constraints as a professional, and the results will either confirm suspicions or calm them. Perhaps the fear of replacement is overstated, or maybe the worry is justified in ways we haven't admitted yet. Either way, this competition will bring clarity. And speaking of clarity, let's look the challenge setup, human versus Copilot. Could a button click really match years of structured practice in building data models, writing DAX, and shaping visuals that highlight the right points for decision makers? That's what we're about to put on the line. The setup is straightforward. 2 participants, 1 challenge, same data set. On one side, a developer who knows the ins and outs of Power BI, who has troubleshot countless broken relationships and misaligned measures in production systems. On the other side, Copilot. Instead of typing formulas or dragging fields around, it listens to prompts and pushes out code and charts automatically. It's speed against judgment, automation against craft. And the key question, which method actually works better once you need something a business would rely on? To make this more than just theory, we've picked a task that sits right in the middle of what most professionals face every day. It's not so trivial that demo data could solve it in seconds, but not so customized that no machine could attempt it. Both sides get a sales dataset with multiple tables, orders, customers, product details, time periods. The ask is simple enough to state: connect the data source, build out relationships, create measures for revenue and profit, and display them in a dashboard view. But anyone who has touched Power BI knows that this phrasing hides a host of challenges. Relationships don't always line up cleanly. Profit calculations can be trickier than they appear. And visuals can look good in a default layout but mean very little without context. The developer will approach it like they do in client projects. Step 1. Check the source tables for integrity. Step 2. Define relationships deliberately instead of assuming defaults. Step 3. Design measures that match business requirements rather than raw arithmetic. It's steady methodical work. The Copilot approach looks almost alien by comparison. You write a prompt like show sales by customer region or create a measure for net profit, and a few seconds later it generates output. In theory, one prompt can bypass several minutes of manual effort, but speed alone doesn't make it correct. If Copilot builds a relationship based purely on column names, it might not capture the actual business logic. A foreign key mismatch that a human would spot quickly could pass silently into Copilot's suggestion. That's where the stakes come in. It's not just about who's faster, it's about who's right. A miscalculation in a learning demo is harmless. A miscalculation in a quarterly business review can shift decisions with real costs attached. And yet there's no denying the appeal of pressing a button and getting results instantly. It's like watching two athletes compete in the same event, but one of them has a machine pushing behind their stride. In sports, technology often reshapes competition: running shoes, swimwear, even analytics on performance. Here, the parallel is the same. Copilot is the engineered technology that bends the process itself, while the developer relies on their own trained discipline. The fascination lies in seeing whether engineering strength really beats out expertise. What makes this comparison especially interesting is the starting pace. Copilot gets off the line quickly. Within seconds of choosing a dataset, it generates the first visuals, throws out some calculated fields, and fills an empty canvas with color. To a casual glance, it feels like a head start the human could never catch. But speed can be deceptive. Those early charts might look neat but be disconnected from real-world KPIs. Maybe the revenue number is pulled incorrectly, or filters don't align to reporting expectations. The early sparkle can mask deep cracks. For the developer, the launch feels slower because they're validating as they go. They're not showing immediate fireworks, but they're laying a base that holds up under scrutiny. So what exactly will we measure to decide the winner? 3 things: speed, because finishing faster has obvious value when deadlines loom; accuracy, because wrong numbers aren't just useless, they're dangerous; and quality, meaning how usable and understandable the final dashboard feels to a manager or decision maker. Those 3 points give us a fair balance between raw power and thoughtful design. Just like in a sporting match where quick plays earn points, but consistency makes champions. Both flashy moments and steady execution matter here. And that's the stage we've set. 2 players, 1 shared dataset, a mix of mechanics, logic, and presentation. With the framework clear, it's time to stop speculating and start watching. Let's see how Copilot handles the very first major hurdle, getting from dataset to working output without tripping itself up. Speed versus accuracy, first results roll in. Fast doesn't always mean right, and the first results here make that clear. Copilot launches straight into action. Within seconds of receiving the dataset, it has already spit out bar charts, line graphs, and a handful of DAX measures that look surprisingly polished at first glance. For someone watching live, the initial impression is that it's creating, in moments, what usually takes a human developer a good chunk of time to arrange. That kind of speed is impressive, no question. But the challenge we're testing isn't just whether something shows up quickly on screen. The real test is whether those results can actually be trusted when they're put under business pressure. The human developer, by comparison, feels almost slow. They're taking the time to explore the tables, tracing relationships, and double-checking data types before even placing a visual. At first, this looks inefficient, especially next to Copilot's instant productivity. But here's what's important: that slower momentum is deliberate. Each action is grounded in making sure the numbers won't break later under complex queries or filters. It might not look glamorous, but the groundwork ensures what's being built rests on something solid, instead of a structure that collapses the moment assumptions are tested. And this is where we see tension start to rise. Copilot has an easy time with the basics. Calculating total revenue, for instance, is no problem. It recognizes the right field, slaps sum around it, and generates a clean working measure. For beginners or managers who just want a high-level view, that's already valuable. But the moment requirements stretch beyond the simple cracks show. Take something like year-to-date profit margin. Copilot creates a measure that looks right in formula form, but when applied, the totals don't actually reflect the intended business logic. Filters cut across tables inconsistently. Some categories inflate, others underreport. On the surface, it still looks like a working chart, but dig a little deeper and the results mislead. The developer is slower with the same request. Instead of instantly creating a measure, they cross-check which columns define profit margin. They adjust for product discounts explicitly. They make sure that the time intelligence functions reference the proper calendar table. This extra testing means they don't push out any visual until they're confident it reflects how the business actually measures margin. The process looks cautious because it is. That's the difference. Copilot goes for immediate output, while the human prioritizes validation step by step. If you've ever tried to write a more advanced DAX expression yourself, this scenario should feel familiar. Things look simple at first, then quickly spiral into trial and error once filters, relationships, and custom logic come into play. And it turns out the AI struggles with the same traps that trip up human learners. Basic arithmetic? No problem. Anything requiring filter context swaps or custom aggregations? Suddenly things get shaky. Watching Copilot misinterpret what counts as active customer revenue is almost a textbook mistake, one you recognize if you've ever debugged a misapplied calculate before. That difference matters because while rapid prototyping has real value, production environments demand reliability. Managers don't just want numbers that appear quickly, they want numbers they can defend in a meeting, numbers they can trust to drive a decision without second-guessing the underlying math. Copilot's speed in spinning up drafts would be fantastic for brainstorming or initial exploration. But in production, the risk of small misalignments growing into major reporting errors becomes a limiting factor. The trade-off is obvious on screen. Speed delivers early bragging rights, but accuracy secures long-term value. Everyone watching can see that Copilot handily wins this first round on speed. It's hard to argue with instant visuals and automatically generated measures that technically run with no effort. But side by side, doubts creep in. If every chart needs double-checking anyway, how much time are you really saving? For now, Copilot has crossed the first finish line faster, yet it leaves the impression of an athlete who sprints early but doesn't look steady enough to win the entire race. And the real test isn't even here yet. Building quick visualizations is one thing, but when it comes to connecting tables, handling multiple relationships, and preserving accurate filter context, the pressure ramps up. That's where surface-level speed won't matter as much as adaptability to business complexity, which raises the next critical question. Once we hit relational data modeling, will automation start showing its limits, or can Copilot keep its momentum moving forward? The breaking point, complex data modeling. Simple demos are easy. The real test comes when the data stops being neat and starts behaving like the real world. In this round of the challenge, the focus shifts to complex modeling. Instead of working with a tidy table of sales transactions, both Copilot and our developer are faced with a multi-table dataset. There are customer records, product hierarchies, sales orders, discount tables, returns, and a separate calendar table for time intelligence. Anybody who has built a non-trivial Power BI model knows this is where things often break down. A flashy chart doesn't mean much unless the foundation, the relationships and calculated fields, can stand up to actual business logic. Copilot's approach here is to automate. It looks at column names, scans for similar keys, and proposes relationships as if they were obvious matches. On the surface, that sounds helpful, but in reality, business data rarely maps cleanly just by column name. For example, Copilot spots customer ID in 2 tables and builds a join. Technically, it works, but once the model is tested with active customers versus churned customers, the join inflates totals because it ignores status fields that should have been factored in. It produces a result, but not the right result. And the real problem is that the output still looks absolutely fine until you drill into why the numbers feel off. By contrast, the developer doesn't assume that customer ID should always tie straight across. They pause and check how the business defines active customer in the dataset. That awareness changes how they model the relationship. Instead of letting every customer link back, they introduce filters so only active customers count toward the measure. It takes more time, but the totals now align with expectations. This difference illustrates the core challenge Copilot faces. Machines can guess joins, but they can't easily apply the nuance of organizational rules that aren't explicitly written in the schema. Another example plays out with profit calculation across multiple fact tables. Copilot generates an automated relationship between the sales table and discounts table, but it defaults to a many-to-many join because both tables include overlapping keys. Anyone who has worked with many-to-many in Power BI knows this can cause inflated aggregations, especially if filters aren't applied correctly. Copilot doesn't flag any warning. The chart it creates looks polished, but when compared with the developer's version, profit margins skyrocket unrealistically. From a business perspective, these inflated numbers could mislead management into believing performance is far stronger than it actually is. The developer spots the problem quickly. They restructure the model by normalizing the discount data and separating it into a bridge table. That move converts the relationship into a one-to-many, which allows for accurate aggregation that represents business conditions properly. This moment highlights why context is everything. To Copilot, a join is a join. To a BI developer, a join is a decision with direct impact on how management sees company performance. That difference is the breaking point we start to notice when moving from simple tasks to meaningful modeling. There's also the matter of calculated fields. Copilot can draft DAX expressions, but once they need time intelligence, things get shaky. For instance, it proposes a year-over-year measure using a built-in function, but applies it against the transaction date in the orders table instead of the dedicated calendar table. The result displays numbers that feel plausible but drift slightly with missing periods. In real scenarios, subtle errors like that often go unnoticed until a quarterly review exposes discrepancies. The developer, of course, knows better. They validate that the calculations use the proper calendar table and align with fiscal year logic. It isn't just a matter of writing a formula, it's about knowing which reference produces results leadership depends on. Watching both side by side is telling. Copilot produces flashy outputs at record pace, but its confidence hides fundamental errors. The developer may appear slower, but the accuracy of their model eliminates the risk of misleading reports. It underscores a simple truth: AI reads patterns, but it doesn't understand meaning unless the rules are already fed explicitly. Business logic often lives outside the dataset. In conversations, policies, and context, Copilot cannot infer. That is where human expertise still holds an edge. The automated workflow looks smooth until rules shift or ambiguity creeps in. Then the cracks show. Complex modeling isn't about how fast a graph renders, it's about ensuring the logic behind that graph stands up under scrutiny. In this round, the developer demonstrates exactly that. Copilot stumbles, the human corrects, and the end model reflects the business more accurately. Now that the foundations are set, the focus shifts again. With models built and calculations tested, the spotlight moves to the final stage, turning all of this into dashboards that decision makers can actually use. The final dashboard quality and usability. It's not just about whether the numbers add up. A working dashboard has to do more than show data. It has to speak directly to the people using it. In this stage, the question becomes less about total calculations and more about usability. You can have the most accurate model in the world, but if leaders can't quickly see what matters, the value drops. That's where we start noticing a very different kind of gap between Copilot and the developer. Copilot takes the lead again with sheer pace. Within minutes, the canvas fills with charts, slicers, and automatically generated layouts. It covers the basics: sales by region, revenue over time, product category breakdowns. It's indisputably faster than building every visual by hand. The automation feels impressive because dashboards that would take an afternoon appear almost instantly. But once you look at the outputs more closely, the excitement fades. The visuals line up, but they feel generic, almost like templates. There's no real prioritization. Revenue appears in the same weight as less critical metrics, and gaps in storytelling are noticeable. A manager browsing through the dashboard would get information but not a narrative. That narrative is exactly what the human developer emphasizes. Instead of letting Power BI drop charts into placeholders, the developer asks, what's the first thing a decision maker needs to see? Profit trend on top, customer churn trend before regional detail. Context comes through in how visuals are ordered, sized, and labeled. Titles are written in plain business language instead of raw database names. The end product is more than a series of charts. It's a story. It guides a user from overview to detail in a way that makes sense. You can tell time and reasoning shape the dashboard rather than just speed. Here's where the contrast really sharpens. Copilot can generate a lot of content very quickly, but quantity isn't quality, especially in analytics. For example, in its first version, Copilot displays total discount amounts in a bold standalone chart. On paper, that's a valid metric. In context, it doesn't mean much without tying it back to margins. Leadership doesn't care how many discounts went out in raw sum. They care about whether those discounts ate into profitability or increased sales volume appropriately. That link is something AI is bad at spotting because it requires reasoning about how one metric influences another. The developer, however, models that comparison directly, putting discounts against gross and net profit over time. The story instantly becomes clearer because it explains rather than just shows. Research on visualization and business intelligence design repeatedly points out that the best dashboards aren't the ones with the most elements, but with the strongest communication. Best practices highlight ideas like avoiding chart clutter, emphasizing comparisons, and framing KPIs in ways that align with organizational goals. Copilot can mimic these practices when they are rule-based, like aligning numbers for readability or suggesting a bar chart instead of a pie where categories exceed a certain count. But encoding subtle best practices, the art of choosing what matters most, is still outside its reach. That requires familiarity with both the data and the business question. The practical difference shows in how the dashboards feel to different audiences. Copilot's output looks like a polished draft that might be useful for internal exploration or initial brainstorming sessions. A team could take it, tweak it, and move towards something better. But ask yourself, would you walk into a boardroom and present it without changes? Probably not. By comparison, the developer's dashboard is slower to emerge but seems ready for executive review right away. It has structure. It communicates intent. Leadership could glance at the top visuals and understand critical trends within seconds. What we're seeing then is a split in utility. Copilot is excellent at jump-starting drafts and covering routine requests, but still lacks the human instinct for clarity and focus. Developers bring that instinct because they know firsthand how stakeholders respond. A chart is never just a chart. It's a decision waiting to happen, and how you frame it changes the outcome. Copilot closes this stage with speed and volume, but the human edges ahead on clarity and storytelling. That raises the final question. If AI produces drafts and humans provide the polish, which role ultimately holds more weight when you compare overall results and long-term implications? Copilot showed it can speed up repetitive steps, draft visuals quickly, and generate measures in seconds. But when the work demanded context, judgment, or business-specific nuance, the developer proved essential. Accuracy and clarity still depend on human decisions. The bigger takeaway isn't a competition for replacement, it's that the two approaches complement each other. Copilot accelerates, the developer validates and refines. Together, they move faster without losing trust in the numbers. So instead of asking whether Copilot makes developers obsolete, the better question is how it can extend your role. Try it, test it, and keep control.